Okay, friends, for today, we are going to talk about something called time. Can you say time? Time means things that are taking place right now. Time can also mean things that took place in the past, like yesterday. Time can also mean things that will take place in the future, like tomorrow. Now, time is super important. Can you tell me why you think time is important? You can tell your families why you think time is super important. You can pause the video right here. All right, friends, let's come back together. Now, time is really important. It's really important to know time because it tells us when things start. It tells us when school starts. Time tells us when your favorite TV show starts. Time can also help us make sure that we are not late for our doctor's appointments or for school. So that's why time is super important. Now, we read time. So we read time on a clock. That's how we know the time. Now, do you know what a clock is? Do you have a clock in your house? You can point to your clock right now. In our classroom, we had a clock right by the door. And today, I'm going to introduce to you all the different parts of a clock so that we can tell the time. Okay, so there are a couple of very important parts to a clock. Now, most clocks, like the one in our classroom, is this shape. What shape is this? It's a circle. Now, the shape of the clock is called the face. So I'm going to point to the shape of the clock. I'm going to write the word face. A little happy face like that. Just like on a 3D shape, your clock has a face, and the face is the shape of the clock. So this clock has a circle face. Some clocks have a square face. Some clocks have a oval face. The face of a clock can be any shape. All right, so the first part of a clock is called the face. On every clock, there are numbers that go all the way around the face. And the numbers go 12 at the top. And then you're going to start at 1. And you're going to count all the way around the circle back to 12. So there's 12, 1, 2, 3 on the side here, 4, 5, 6 at the bottom, 7, 8, 9 all the way on the other side, 10, 11, and 12 back at the top. These numbers help us tell time. Okay, so far we have our face and the numbers on the face. And now I'm going to introduce to you these arrows. Let me get these arrows. Every clock has 2 arrows. There's a small arrow and there's also a big arrow. I'm first going to introduce to you the small arrow. Now, it's an arrow, but we don't call it an arrow on the clock. We don't just say, oh, the small arrow is pointing at 3. We don't say small arrow. We call it the small hand. Everyone say small hand. So this is called the small hand. And the small hand tells us the hour. The small hand tells us the hour. So I'm going to draw an arrow pointing to the small hand. I'm going to write down small hand and draw a small arrow to represent the small hand. And again, the small hand tells us the hour. Tell your families, what does the small hand tell us? What does the small hand tell us? The small hand tells us the hour. And now let's move on to the bigger arrow. So this is a big arrow. And again, both arrows, they live in the middle of the face. So we have the small arrow, the small hand, and we also have the big hand. So I'm going to draw an arrow pointing to the big hand. I'm going to write down big hand and a big arrow. Because the big hand tells us the minutes. The big hand tells us the minutes. Tell your families, what does the big hand tell us? The big hand tells us the minutes. So those are the 3 important parts of our clock, and that's all we're going to learn about today and continue tomorrow. So the 3 important parts of a clock that tells us time is 1, the face. Remember, the face can be any shape. Most clock faces are circles. And on the face, there are numbers, 12 at the top, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, back to 12. And this is called clockwise. The arrows or the hands move in a clockwise motion. And the second important part of a clock is this small arrow. What do we call this small arrow? We call it the small hand. And the small hand tells us the hour. And the third important part of a clock is the big arrow. What do we call this big arrow? We call it the big hand. And what does the big hand tell us? The big hand tells us the minutes. All right, friends? So those are the 3 important parts of a clock. And what I want you to do today is draw a clock like Mr. Junie's and label the 3 important parts. How many important parts? The 3 important parts. So make sure you draw and label the face, the small hand, and the big hand. And then make sure you share your pictures in the comments below with your mustache for today. All right, friends, so I can't wait to see your picture of a clock and the clock labeled as well. Good luck, friends.